Obama law? What about Schwarzenegger law? I like to call those areas of law words of encouragement. Words of encouragement. There's no mandatory language in those laws. And I'm going to draw your attention to the United States Constitution. If you took a high school civics class, you probably studied the U.S. Constitution in some degree of detail. As to the state of California, there's something called the Contracts Clause. In Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. It says, no state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of pre-existing contracts. So the state of California can't interfere with the pre-existing contract. It's very difficult for them to do that. And even if they could, and even if they did, is there a taking? Under the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, there's something called the Due Process Clause. Nobody shall be deprived of their life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Property. I draw your attention to the word property. Does the Due Process Clause only apply to human beings? No. It applies to business entities as well. A bank is a business. What is the property of a bank? The loans. Can the government comply with due process requirements and force a bank to modify a loan? Or does that constitute a violation of the bank's due process rights? Because they're interfering with the property of the bank, private property of the bank. Okay, next slide. Now, how is it I know so much about this stuff, and why is it you should listen to me? Now, first and foremost, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to share information with you here today that's probably going to be in conflict with information you've received from other sources. The difference is I'm going to provide you with the legal authority, backing up my position. Other sources probably aren't going to do that. The other sources that you're getting information from probably aren't lawyers. They're probably real estate agents, real estate brokers, foreclosure consultants. They're not lawyers. I've got a unique background. Back in the 80s, I started calling people on the telephone, hammering them for money because they didn't pay their cable bill. I used to work for Cox Cable. You didn't pay your cable bill, you get a call from me. Then I graduated college in 1990. I started working for finance companies, GE Capital. I was the guy that would hire lawyers to sue people who didn't pay their bills. In 94, I took a job with an investment firm where we would purchase portfolios of non-performing debt. That is debt where the borrowers are not making the payments. We'd run out there and we thought those were great things to buy. Why? Why would anybody in their right mind want to buy a portfolio of loans where the borrowers aren't making the payments? Make money. Pay as little as possible for the loan, collect as much as possible on the loan. How would I collect? Two sources of income. The value of the property. So I always look, what's the property worth? If I take the property and I sell it, how much am I going to get? Secondly, if I sue the borrower, how much money am I going to get after I sue him? Where does he work? How much money does he make? If I garnish his wages, how much am I going to get from that? Does he have bank accounts? How much does he have in the bank accounts? Can I take money out of his bank account? Does he own other real estate? Is there equity in that other real estate? Does he have a business? Ladies and gentlemen, that type of thinking is prevalent within the banking industry. To think that it doesn't, it's naive, and you're asking for trouble. You're asking for trouble, okay? I did that full time while going to law school. Went to law school at night. I didn't have rich parents. So I went to law school at night, and I paid for law school on my own. Graduated law school in 1999, went into private practice. Who do you think I started representing? Banks, lenders, debt buyers, collection outfits. Suing people for not paying their bills. And then about 18 months ago, I kind of sort of stopped representing institutional lenders and started taking on consumer-based clients, consumer clients. But that's how I come to know what I know about collections, foreclosure, how all this works. Okay, next slide. Okay, now throughout the course today, I am going to ultimately get to the point where I'm going to provide you with alternatives to deal with mortgage distress. I'll be talking about things like loan modification, short sales, foreclosure, bankruptcy, all those types of things. But before I get there, it's important for you to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the position that you occupy before you start contemplating alternatives. Otherwise, you have no idea whether you're in a good position or a bad position. I have seen many clients go from being in a great position where they had no obligation to pay to completely giving it up because they didn't understand what they had. I want you to understand what you have. That's the only way you can make an intelligent decision as to what's best for you and your family. Okay, so go back, please. One slide. Important words. There we go. These are important words that I'm going to be talking about here today. I introduce them now because I want you to recognize them when I start talking about them. The first word is deficiency. The second word is reinstatement. The third word is redemption. And then the last word is discretionary. When you hear me talk about one of those words, or mention one of those words, the hair on the back of your neck should stick up. You start getting goosebumps on your arms. You say, oh my God, that's one of those words. He says it's important. I better pay attention. I want you to pay attention. When you hear one of these words, sit up, pay attention, because it's something important that I'm talking about. Next slide. What is a foreclosure? Let's start with the foreclosure. Ultimately, if you don't make a payment on your home, you have to realize that you're possibly looking at a foreclosure. So what is a foreclosure? A foreclosure is just another word for repossession. It's the process that the bank goes through to repossess the house. They repossess it, and then they sell it. And then the sales proceeds are applied to the loan. The bank does not need your permission to do that. You have no say. You have no say. When we're talking about real estate secured loans, here again we're talking about contracts, and we're talking about two specific types of contracts. There's one contract called a promissory note, and another one called a deed of trust. What I want you to understand about loans with collateral, and I don't care what kind of collateral it is, there is a general rule that applies to these loans. The general rule is this: the borrower's obligation to pay is independent of the collateral. That means if the collateral is repossessed and sold, the general rule is you're still obligated to pay the unpaid balance on the loan, even after the property's gone. That's not very encouraging. But there are exceptions to that rule, and we're going to talk about that. But what I want you to understand right now is that any borrower that has collateral to their loan is every bit in a position where they're having to find an exception to that general rule. If they cannot find an exception to that general rule, that's unfortunate, because they're obligated to pay the remaining balance on the loan. That's unfortunate. So you are, as a borrower, every bit in a position where you're searching for an exception. You can't find one? Well, that's unfortunate. Sort of restricts what options you have to deal with it. Okay? And we're going to talk about those exceptions here today. Okay? Next slide. Deficiency balance. That's one of those words I mentioned earlier. What is a deficiency balance? Deficiency is the difference between the market value of the property and the loan balance. Usually the loan balance is higher than